So yesterday at DC Fandome, we saw a brief interview with Bruce Timm, J.J. Abrams, Matt Reeves, and James Tucker talking about their new cartoon, Batman Cape Crusader. Now, when this cartoon was first announced earlier this year, it certainly caught my attention because it featured a character design that was very similar to the Batman from Batman the Animated Series, and it also uses the same font as the classic show. Not a lot of additional information about the show has actually come out yet, so I thought I would record some of my ideas for things that I really want to see from this show, even though I'm fairly certain that most of them aren't going to happen. So first on my list, title cards for each episode. I think one of the most memorable things about Batman the Animated Series is the wonderful title cards at the start of each episode, and they were sorely missed from the new Batman adventures. Now, some of these images are dark and haunting, and they will stay with me for the rest of my life. And some of them were quite light and airy and enjoyable, and they kind of gave you an idea of the tone of the episode you were about to watch. So really, I want to see them again. In fact, with the publication of a recent issue of Batman The Adventures Continue, the artist Jordan Gibson, I believe his name is, created a title card for the issue that he had illustrated called The Muscle. And when I first saw that online, it just really reminded me how special those title cards were. And I really hope they start doing those again. Next on my list, something that is also quite uncommon about Batman the Animated Series is the fact that it had a unique score for each episode. And I want to see that come back with Batman Cape Crusader. I know that requires a large budget for the musical team, but it's worth it. When you think of Batman the Animated Series, well, when I think of Batman the Animated Series, the things that come to my mind immediately are the strong character designs, the great scripts, and the music. The music in that show it echoes through my head sometimes. But the show had excellent music, a lot of it composed by the late Shirley Walker, and I'd really, really love to hear more brand new music along similar lines for this show. The third thing I would like to see is an adaptation of one of the more recent really great Batman comics, and that is Batman Ego. Now, Batman Ego was written and illustrated by Darwyn Cooke, who I believe he originally worked in advertising, but then made the jump to animation to work for Bruce Timm on Superman the Animated Series, the new Batman Adventures, and Batman Beyond. And this comic is really good. I can't recommend it enough. It's I don't want to go into the details of the story too much, just in case they do adapt it. But it's about Batman after a particularly harrowing night, after dealing with the aftermath of an attack by the Joker, has a crisis of confidence, and he ends up arguing with himself about how he could proceed with his mission and whether his vow not to kill anyone is the right thing to do. And sadly, Darwyn Cooke passed away a few years ago, and I think this would be a really fitting tribute to him. So the next thing that I would like to see is, I think we can take it as a given that previous writers from Batman the Animated Series will return to write Cape Crusader. Well, I know Bruce Timm's involved, and he wrote some episodes, or at least co-wrote them. And I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. Bring in people like Paul Dini and Randy Rogel, Alan Burnett. Yeah, I could keep listing off names, but there were lots of great writers on there. But one thing I really want to see is a new generation of writers who were brought up with Batman the Animated Series. People like Justin Michael, who wrote for Infinity Train. I think that writers that were fans of the show and grew up watching it probably have a slightly different insight into what makes that show so amazing. And finally, the number one thing I would like to see, and I'm pretty certain that this is not going to happen, but I'm going to say it anyway. I really, really want this show to be a part of the DC animated universe. I would love it to be a prequel to Batman the Animated Series, taking place after the flashbacks in Mask of the Phantasm, and I'm sure that's probably not going to happen. Although it's curious that in the interviews that have taken place so far, no one has explicitly said, no, this is not a continuation of Batman the Animated Series. No, this is not a prequel. The answers almost seem to be different depending on who you speak to. Some play up the fact that it takes place early on in Batman's career, prior to all the villains coming around. And then you have Bruce Timm, who says it's what he originally envisaged Batman the Animated Series being. But I understand why it might not be the best idea to be a prequel to Batman the Animated Series, because you kind of hindered a little bit then. Because you have to stick to continuity, so you wouldn't be able to use villains like Two-Face, Mr. Freeze, Clayface. In fact, who would you be able to use? You could possibly use the Joker. You could use the Penguin easily. Basically, anyone that didn't have an origin episode on the show, you could use. I suppose that means they could finally introduce Kite Man. I think we found out why they don't want to do that. But yeah, I think it would be absolutely fantastic if they could reunite as many of the original cast and crew as possible for this show. Of course, what with it being about 30 years later, not every member of the cast and crew is still with us. Notably, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., who played Alfred, and Bob Hastings, who played Commissioner Gordon, and Roddy McDowall, who was the Mad Hatter. They're no longer alive, so you'd have to recast those roles. And then you could potentially end up with unfavourable comparisons. How do you live up to, someone that's no longer with us? But yeah, those are the 5 things that I would like to see in Batman Caped Crusader. If none of them happen, I will not be upset, because so far I like everything that I'm hearing about the show. And do you know what? If it does turn out to not be very good, or not be what I would like, doesn't matter. The original show still exists. It makes no difference to me whatsoever. I still have my fingers crossed though.